All right, guys and girls, my name is Taylor May. I'm the founder of Security VIP, SVIP. Welcome to SVIP Live. Again, this is Joe Doe. He's the Vice President of Corporate Security of MGM Resorts. So, Joe, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Taylor. This is exciting. I'm honored to be the first that you're doing a live interview with, and thank you and SVIP for the invite. Looking forward to speaking with everybody and chatting a little bit about the casino security business.
Yeah, the one thing about doing these lives, you never know what kind of questions you're going to get. But number two, I actually like it because I'm all about nothing but the truth. And you're someone that speaks nothing but the truth, my friend. So, this is going to be a good discussion.
I like it. Yep, for sure.
So, Joe, why don't you give our listeners and people tuning in a little context about your background, your experience, and kind of what you bring to the casino sector?
Yeah, for sure. So, Vice President of Corporate Security for MGM's properties, regional properties. So, our properties domestically outside of Las Vegas is what I oversee. So, the security operations at all of our facilities off the strip, based here in Washington, D.C. at the MGM National Harbor location when I'm not on the road. So, I have been with MGM since 2019, so just past my 6 years. Prior to that, corporate security for Hilton hotels, mainly their Eastern United States, Canada, Puerto Rico security operations, training, work development for stuff overseas. And then prior to that, got into the hospitality industry kind of by accident, going to college thinking that I was going to join one of the three-letter agencies, doing some valet bellman work to make some money, make ends meet, doing a little bit of executive protection internship work, and that's kind of how I fell into things out of accident during one of the many government sequesters. Decided to just dip my toe and keep moving forward with the private security aspect in the entertainment industry. Fell in love with it and been doing it ever since.
It's funny, Joe, which I'm sure you know this gentleman, Tony Clark, who's actually on the call right now. Anthony Clark is his name. He
Yep.
tells me all the time, man, I kind of just fell into this industry, and once you fell into the industry, you're kind of stuck. And I say the same thing about security. Once you're in the industry, it's hard to get out. So that's my question, man. Coming from Hilton, everyone knows Hilton hotels. So that now you spent over 6 years with MGM. Talked about the differences between running security at a hotel at a grand scheme versus a well-known casino and challenges you see in gaming. Like any parallel there, any
Yeah.
differences? Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think no doubt there's parallels, right? The hospitality, predominantly the hotel industry, major convention traffic that you would see at large scale Hilton hotels, Marriott hotels. There's similarities there. The gaming aspect of it with MGM brings a whole different ballgame to things, as you can imagine. I mean, how they make movies about that kind of stuff, right? So the physical security elements, the cyber security elements are different when you input gaming and introduce that type of environment, especially with the large scale resorts that we have overseas on the strip, our regional properties in various locations. Different clientele, different environment, a lot of money, gambling. You mix casino chips, losing money, winning money, alcohol, all in one can present some pretty unique challenges from a security aspect. So, although there are some similarities, I think when you take a look at casino resorts, particularly the resort properties that we have at MGM or any in the industry, they sort of operate, we like to say, as small cities, a small municipality police departments per se, with those support entities and how they look like. I mean, you look at back of house areas of major resorts, casino resorts like we have, and it's a city within a city. You have a whole different element going on behind the scenes supporting that. And, you see some of those elements, I think, just in the hotel sector for sure. But, make no mistake, the casino element of it brings a whole different realm of security challenges and support and exposure.
I've said this before, and you were on my panel a couple months ago at Richard Marcus's conference in Tulsa, and I've said this countless times in the industry that casinos and gaming, I think, is the most difficult environment to protect. I mean, you've got 24/7 operations, you've got mass foot traffic. You guys are very, very open. No matter what casino you guys go to, guys and girls to go to casinos, the casinos are very, very open. But you've got lighting combinations, you've got all walks of life, and I'll put that politely, coming inside the casino.
Well
Um,
said.
Yeah, but you never know what you're gonna get, right? Where any given Sunday, where you have other establishments and businesses, typically they close down at a certain time of the day. Well, you guys don't close down. You guys never shut down. You might have dead periods on holidays and stuff, but I mean, honestly, Joe, I mean, walk me through like the everyday challenge that I know it probably varies day by day, but what is a common challenge right now in 2025 for you guys at MGM for casinos?
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, and I think that's part of the allure too, and it's what attracts me to want to continue to be in the business. Is there's always something different every single day, and you walk into a facility, you might have some top tier talent performing in one of your arenas or your theaters. You got things going on in the restaurants. You got activations. I mean, MGM prides itself. It's an entertainment company, not just a casino gaming company, and I think a lot of the competitors in our industry perceive themselves that way too. You hit on all the unique challenges. The other one too is compliance, right? We're a
Mm,
highly regulated industry, regulated as much as the financial industry in a lot of aspects. I mean, if you break down the concept of the casino, it's a large scale bank, and we have to operate that way in order to have the chips and the cash flowing the way that they are, and that's inherently how the company makes money. But the unique challenges over the last 5 years, 2020, whatever it is, right? Like any industry, our concerns are always the same things, from suspicious packages, shooting, you name it. Those are the run of the mill that will always keep you up at night, that you're always looking and making sure that we're protecting with. But I think the unique one to always talk about, particularly for our industry, is retention and recruitment,
mm,
especially over the last 5 years, has been a tremendous challenge for the casino industry and the sector overall. A uniqueness behind it is when you break down individuals leaving the casino security business, they're one of the highest percentages of people who never return. So they leave, you're not getting them to come back. And from an MGM perspective, there was a point in time over the last few years where our attrition, our turnover rate for security staff was 60%. So when
wow.
you take a look at, and we could talk about all the reasons potentially behind that, right? Was it COVID? Was it changing the dynamics of what our employees were dealing with? I think all of those are a piece of it, but the reality is, if you take a look at the process of hiring somebody, how long it takes them to get a gaming badge because they're going through that process, the time, energy, and effort us as a company put into training, to see 60% attrition, I mean, that's a threat, that's a risk to our entire industry, and MGM in specific, being 60%. So we had to dive into those data, those analytics. Why are people leaving? What is it? Is it unique in a particular area compared to another? How are we recognizing our employees? How are we making our employees, especially our legacy employees, feel that being a security officer is a career, not just a job, a career path? Adding those elements, emphasizing the right level of training. Some of the feedback was, we had turnover because some security officers that we hired didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. So is there a
Right.
marketing aspect there that we have to really, when we're hiring individuals, talk to them about, hey, like you said, sometimes you're dealing with a whole element that isn't the sexy piece of the casino business. You're dealing with some very serious situations. So all of those elements, leadership development, and that's another piece too. Oftentimes there's a lot of focus from companies, and in our industry was not an outlier with that. Is you focus on the line level staff, you focus on the executive level, but a lot of times that middle management is who drives your culture, and is who you really should be investing in to ensure that they are promoting a culture of retention, and we're keeping people, and we're taking care of our employees. So leadership development in that aspect became a huge part, and I think is still a huge part of our industry, to protect that number one risk of retention and recruitment. And us, over the last year, the success behind it was, we saw that turnover rate drop to 25%. So we went from 60 to 25%.
Nice.
We're
Yeah.
still seeing that drop through an abundance of programs and a true focus on that. But that inherently, looking at it for the last 5 years, has been the biggest risk to our industry. The biggest threat is the people aspect of it.
Well, that so that kind of parallels to one question that I want to ask you, but I'll ask you in a second. But one of the things that I've seen, again, I'm going to point to Tony Clark, who's listening in. What he told me on a discussion with him was he looks for gamers and coders for his SOC, his SOC, because they're used to seeing multi things during like Call of Duty. Like Call of Duty is a great example, but
Yeah,
split screen things going on. That's exciting. That's when it comes to attrition and retaining employees. That they, I think Tony's done a good job doing that in the SOC, but I know it's like a payment thing. Sometimes casinos can't pay employees enough, but another thing too that when I spoke with a security communications manager, his name is Jason Boss. You might know that last name, Dirk Boss,
yeah,
who's
sure, yeah,
his
yep.
son works for Westgate. And again, I had a conversation with Jason. I said, "Hey, Jason, like, how do you keep employees? Like, 'cause he manages a team, and he manages people older than him and younger than him, so he's got different generations and mentalities." And he said,
Yeah.
"Taylor, I try to train them where they can take my job and not exceed more than my job. So I want them to eventually replace me." And now I thought that
Yeah.
was interesting because if you're training a team to ultimately take your job as a VP of corporate security, I think you establish that kind of culture that everyone wants to be a part of. Like to excel. And maybe that's not important to everyone at a casino. Maybe they're
Yeah.
happy with their current role, but I think finding that passion of saying, "Hey, you can have a career here in security, and this is a way to do it, and what matters the most to you." That's what a good leader does, which I'm sure you've done well at MGM.
Look, you're right on it, and boss is right. Like it's empowering your employees, and it doesn't matter what they are. It could be that brand new security officer that's just standing post, he's checking IDs, right? Empowering them, making them feel like they are part of the greater good of what we are trying to do. And if you empower them and you show them that there are paths forward to potentially replace you one day, that's key. A great example of that is, you know, at all of our properties, the number one for security at the property we refer to as the chief of security. We have two in our company that they're 25, 30-year employee. They started as a security officer and they became a chief of security. And, as part of taking a look at retention and attrition rates for us, we need to celebrate those. And that's what we've done. You celebrate that success story of, hey, just because you're a security officer and your mindset might be a little bit different right now, or you're just dipping your toe in the industry, you embrace that and you show them that there's a way. You mentor them, you get them to that next level. And as long as you're a leader that looks at it that way and instills that in the leaders that are in your company, and that's what we've done in our company, the numbers don't lie. You see the reversal and how you have turnover, and you're protecting the culture that you have.
Nothing but the truth, Joe. I like it, man. So I do want to point this out because for folks listening right now, I've got a TikTok with SVIP, and one of the videos I posted on TikTok got quite some attention, and and everyone knows about this, the 2017 Mandalay Bay shooting that happened in Vegas. Now, Joe, I understand this is after your time, so this is you weren't at MGM when this shooting took place, but maybe you have some insights and maybe some stories to tell or lessons learned from that shooting that did take place in 2017, because that was a tragic event. Over 60 people lost their life during that event. So maybe you can share some insights, man, with our listeners here.
Yeah, absolutely. A horrific event, right? And to your point, yes, I didn't start with MGM till 2019, so it's kind of an outsider perspective, and just being an industry individual, working for Hilton at the time, it had profound effects on all of us and how we take a look at that, and still to this day, unfortunately, the worst mass shooting situation in U.S. history. To your point, Mandalay Bay, one of our properties, the spot where the Route 91 Music Festival, one of our locations as well. And I think with any tragedy like that, especially as it costs lives, affects the entire community, has a tremendous impact on our company. You're always going to look for ways forward to ensure something like that doesn't happen again, or help mitigate and help protect that. And some of the key takeaways are, communication. Communication is always critical, as a critical element. How you're communicating out via the public, how you're coordinating with your local law enforcement professionals and the relationships that have been built there, how you're communicating to your employees, because the reality is, you take a step back, and it has a monumental effect on everybody involved. even if you weren't an employee that was working during that time or at that property, you're part of a community and a culture that we need to make sure that we're taking care of those individuals. And I would say that that is always something that we like to say, hey, great lessons, always be prepared as a company, especially if you're operating major facilities like this with tons of employees that you can have that kind of exposure, that you're thinking through that element of the best way to take care of your employees and how you are communicating external and internal during a situation like that. You can always look for lessons learned from those types of situations. And I also think that that comes down to the point about, communication and how you're promoting a culture of awareness. We coined the phrase "see something, say something" since 9/11 as a culture, right? And a lot of times people just, you brush that one aside, but it's true from a security perspective in any industry, particularly ours too. And the size of our facilities we have, everyone has a part in the security and safety of all of our guests and employees. And it doesn't stop just if security is in your title, and how you're promoting that and how you're training individuals to understand that if you do see something, having that reported to a central repository where you're having key stakeholders take a look at that and go, well, maybe one thing isn't necessarily an indicator of something bad. And that could be shooting, that could be human trafficking, that could just be regular criminal activity. But as long as if there's multiple people that have seen various things with one particular person, reporting that to one central repository where those key stakeholders are reviewing it, and perhaps if it was siloed, you wouldn't necessarily view that as a potential threat. But if it's in one location and you have the right people are reviewing that going, there's 5 or 6 things here, this might be something that we need to take a look at. I think those are lessons that you take away from any situation like that that are critical and important. And then the other piece with that is, we're always, I think, culture wise, whether that's casino, hospitality, just the security industry in general, if you think about like tabletop exercises, things that we always promote, it's, before boom, not necessarily left of boom. But the reality is, as a company, the left of boom is the lengthy, hard part. And it is training and making sure that key stakeholders are coordinated to understand what does business resumption and business continuity look like after a tragedy. Let's assume it happened. Let's train in tabletop exercise on how we recover and what's that look like. And sometimes, and this is just speaking in generalities, that's missed because our mindset is prepared to avoid that happening. And absolutely you should, and you should always train on that. But sometimes things happen and we see it every single day. And it's ensuring you're prepared on how to react to that if you're left of boom and it's already happened. So, those are some key takeaways that I think you can pull out of really any situation, but in particular, the one that you're referencing to.
Well, I agree. I think security in general should be a shared responsibility, regardless of your title or role within an organization. I mean, I spoke with the school and safety director this morning, and obviously schools and education, especially K through 12, are sometimes under-resourced and understaffed, so they have
Yep.
to rely on external help consultants, or it's someone else, monitoring security. But the teachers and the staff and the janitor, like they should all have some level of, safety and security training or crisis management training in case something does happen, you know? And I think
You're absolutely right.
that's a
Yep.
general responsibility.
It is. I can think of a million scenarios off the top of my head where it has been a bellman, a
Yeah.
valet, a parking attendant. That is, something told them, their gut told them something was a little off. They reported it to security, and security was able to look into it and act accordingly, whether that's linking up with law enforcement or whatnot. And something terrible could have been avoided, or something terrible was avoided. And that shows you that that happens more times than not. And a lot of times the general public doesn't recognize that. But the emphasis internally at your company is you need to recognize that, promote that, celebrate that employee, because that is how you embed that in the culture of positive recognition that those outside of security are part of this. And it can be something as simple as you go to one of their stand-ups with their managers and they're celebrated in front of everybody. Or we're an industry that loves challenge coins, make them and give them. Like that could set the tone for that employee's entire future with your company, and you can't take something like that for granted.
Get you a Oklahoma State Challenge coin, my friend.
Give me one of those. I'll give you an MGM one. We'll
Yeah,
trade.
I'll take one of
Yeah.
those. Yeah, you're right though, and I want to talk about technology too because we have a couple technology vendors on this call. I think that what I have seen on the security side is there's not a lot of humility sometimes with vendors in the technology space or security space where they say, "Hey, Joe, these challenges you got, man, like I would love to sell you my product and, get my commission check. But you know what? I know in my heart, my product's not going to solve your damn challenge, Joe. But there's not enough of that going on. There's not enough
There is.
humility to say, hey, look, I'm going to refer you to someone else that can help mitigate or help solve or at least give you some kind of resolution around some challenges you're going through. So that's one thing I like to encourage vendors in the industry is like, you need to be transparent, you need to be accountable, you need to be upfront. And even if it's a direct competitor, you should be referring the best optimal solution for someone like Joe. Because honestly, Joe, if I referred something else to you and it ended up working, and then I go somewhere else to work for another company, I guarantee you would take my call because that trust has been established and formed, right?
You cannot, nothing outweighs relationship building and
Yeah,
trust. And that goes for anything, but particularly end user to a vendor relationship. And you're right, like especially in the technology space for security, I mean, it's overwhelming, right? You could be an expert or consider yourself fairly knowledgeable about emerging technologies, and the reality is you're still there's so much out there, an abundance of everything, that the worst thing that I could have is being sold something that's not really going to work, right? And you're not looking for that typical sales pitch. You're looking for a relationship where we both can learn and grow from one another, right? Because there's no technology that is out there that I think solves everything, right? But having that effective relationship with a vendor and an end user where, hey, there's certain aspects of this that I think that your technology, if it was tweaked or we made some adjustments here, work with me, I'll work with you. We both learn and grow from one another, and it's effective for both sides. I do think, like to your point, that's not as prevalent.
right.
A lot of things are canned, they're given to you. And I'll take that a step further because it's on our side too. And I mean, our side as industry is oftentimes you see there's just an abundance of technology that is being used at companies, but they're not being used to their full potential. There's just so many of them. Sometimes taking a step back, having clean data, recognizing and analyzing what is it that you're trying to solve for and sticking to that and training your staff to effectively use that and utilizing that piece of technology before you start diving in and grabbing anything else that you think will help and assist is the better option. And that's not necessarily technology related. That's just making sure that your key stakeholders and your data of what you currently are using are clean enough that you're making the right decisions for the company moving forward, and honestly for the vendor as well. And you see that time and time again in the private sector. Is it's just, you go somewhere and you're like, you've got 50 tools and you're barely touching the surface of some of them, and it's not conducive for that environment.
Well, that's my whole point. I'll take a step further on the manufacturer side is manufacturers that come out with the latest and greatest bells and whistles of drone, lidar, weapon detection. Well, cool, that's super cool, but if an end user is not basically set up with the basic functions of security, whether it's doors, like locks on doors, or it's turning analog cameras to IP cameras, or what have you, why the hell would I sell them a drone? They're not going to
Right.
use it. Yeah,
Right.
it's cool, it's sexy, and I think, and I'm not pointing to casinos, but I'm really pointing to some education customers where superintendents and directors of security and director of security and safety, they see these bells and whistles at these amazing conferences like IC West, and they're like, oh, we need this, but it's like, dude, why don't you fix the door, the lock on the door over there? Why is that
Yep.
open? Why is that breaking? It's like it's just basic stuff that I think humility on the manufacturer side should be bringing to an end user when it comes to pitching a product. That's just my personal belief. I'm sure I'll get, some backlash for that. But that's just, I mean, it's being honest, it's being transparent.
Yep. You speak the truth too. That's why I appreciate it. That's where you and I connect as well. You're 100% right. It's a mutual relationship, and there's mishaps on both sides. That it's important that both recognize that too. That relationship and growing together and being realistic about what's going to solve a particular issue is important. And honestly, it goes back to what I talked about as our our greatest threat in our industry is retention and recruitment too,
Yeah.
because that piece, if you know that you're applying emerging technologies, which everybody is, you need to make sure that you're hiring the quality and the right individual that can apply the human and machine learning to that. And if you're not, you better have the right training programs in place that are solely focused on that. And it's not just a training one and done, it's training, and then you have a process behind it to ensure that they're using it effectively, and there's checks behind that. And that's oftentimes a miss in the industry overall as well. So, again, it goes both ways.
That brings me to the next question I want to ask you. Before I ask you that question, guys and girls, we're 30 minutes in. Again, I want to invite you to raise your hand if you want to ask Joe a question. This is the opportunity to ask Joe a question. I don't care if you work for a vendor, I don't care if you're another end user, an integrator, or you're even outside the industry. This is your opportunity to ask the question, because I guarantee if you try to cold call Joe, he probably won't answer your call too much. So just kidding. But seriously, I want to invite anyone that has a question, please raise your hand. I will bring you to the front and I will admit you and let you ask Joe a question. But Joe, that question about automation and AI, we talk about it a lot. Michael Chapman, director of table games for Delaware North, another casino up in the northeast, he talked about that, about AI replacing human operators, whether it's for table games, whether it's for experience, whether it's for safety and security. So how do you see AI? Everyone talks about AI. It's kind of an annoying term now in the industry, but how are you balancing that with your environment at MGM?
Yeah, look, I think industry wide in the casino sector and anywhere, emerging technology, especially AI, and you're right, it's such a term that's thrown out there. I'd argue you ask 9 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10 of the answers are going to be different what AI is, right? um, and it's important that when you're talking about AI, the best way that I've used that terminology is it's machine and human learning, right? No AI product is going to outweigh what a human being is. Like, they have to work together. So on that particular question about how it changes the strategy of, staffing, is it going to replace humans? I don't see it replacing humans in our industry. I think it reshapes the efficiencies, and the AI is there to support the quality of the human that you have that's out there. Sure, in any industry, it might change the way that you're posting people. There might be an opportunity where you can leverage machines a little bit more to monitor areas where you can improve the way the response times are from a particular human. But you talk about monitor rooms, dispatch rooms. When it comes to AI and emerging technology, you have to have really qualified, smart individuals that understand not only how to use the technology, but that they're aware of what it is that they're looking for. So, I think the more technology that you apply to these monitor rooms, or expecting humans to look at it, the better quality candidate, the better quality training that you need. So when you take a look at it from that aspect, no, I don't think you see this replacing humans and replacing the quality of what the individual provides. That human element is so important in our industry, especially when we're a guest service driven industry, right?
Hmm.
Everybody still wants some level of that human touch. And if you look at a security officer perspective, whether they're armed or unarmed, time and time again, when you look at guest comments that come back in our particular industry, it's they felt safe because they saw that visual deterrent. And make no mistake, there's still no way of replacing that as a human being. The technology's there. A lot of times it's in the background, but it's utilizing that technology to support the human and how they're responding to that particular situation. And that goes well beyond security. Like, that's great for security too, but it also supports guest service. It supports, making sure that people want to come back and spend money with us, that they feel comfortable at these venues. It's identifying ways that we can tap into it, what it is that they want to do to return to that property in particular. So it goes well beyond security, but, long story short, to answer that question, I think it improves the way that humans are approaching it, as long as it's approached that way, where you understand emerging technology and AI is human and machine learning, and they both can learn from one another.
Well, I mean, the reason why I bring that up, and Michael Chapman brought this up at Richard's conference is, I do some online gambling. I know I think my wife's on this call, so she's probably gonna, get at me after this. But, you
That
know,
MGM, I hope, right? Yep.
yeah,
Sounds
all different kind of properties, right? But betting online, when you're in, whether it's Meta, we get the VR headset, you have an experience, you can be sitting next to someone all from the comfort of your couch, right? I think that was the battle he was talking about, was that kind of experience, just from a luxury standpoint. Why do I have to go spend money at a casino, at a brick and mortar, and pay for gas and,
like
pay for mood, like, so what you think that's gonna like take some employees away or take some visitors away from the casino? What do you think?
that's a good question. And look, it's talked about all the time in the industry, right? Like, is the new generation not the type that wants to go to your brick and mortar locations, right? Um, that's why, like, when you think about the way that the industry perceives itself, they look far beyond it just being a casino, and you need to create an experience that's going to attract people to come there, whether that's with your entertainment, your dining options, other offerings. They're fully immersive hospitality environments that are beyond just the gambling portion of it. And look, we're still in a world right now where the casino industry, the biggest part of the money making is the casino itself.
Yeah.
So in time, do companies need to start shifting the thought process that how do you account for there's a whole new generation that might not patronize as much to play blackjack in person and they would rather do that online? But possibly and potentially. I'm a security guy, so that's just from my perspective. But I'm sure there's far smarter marketing and table games and casino folks that have a far greater view on that themselves. But the reality is, it's definitely talked about, and it's something that is it of concern? Sure, you got to think 20, 30 years down the road, how is your company going to survive that's predominantly based on gambling? For sure.
I think it's interesting. I think at time we'll kind of tell how it unfolds. I think some casinos will adopt to this challenge better than others. Maybe corporate will adopt better than tribal. I like to go back and forth between tribal and corporate sometime. But we do have our
Sure.
first question, Joe. I think you know this gentleman, Mr. Douglas Florence. So Douglas, I'm going to bring you to the spotlight, my friend, and I'm going to allow you to ask a question to Joe. I'm going to ask you to unmute as well.
You got it. Thank you. Hey, Joe, great job. I just wanted to compliment you on the topics you covered. And, I totally agree on the AI topic. It is a true workforce multiplier. And you have to excuse some of the background noise. I'm at a doctor's appointment with my wife. But I just wanted to bring that up as you hit the nail on the head when you look at AI and the purpose of the AI and then bringing that human contact into it. I don't think the human contact will ever go away. And I think totally you look at the subject you're talking about now, which is the player development side and the blending of the online players, the youth of America versus the gray hairs like us out here, right? So the technology side is going to help the brick and mortar, I think. And in Vegas, brick and mortar is going to stay alive. It'll always be alive. And I think our online gamers like yourself, Tyler, are really going to benefit from that true experience. And on that note, I'm going to go back to mute.
Well, Doug, I'm gonna agree with you because the amount of times I went to Vegas last year was probably too many times that my wife would let me go to Vegas because I enjoy the experience in Vegas. Vegas is great for casinos, and I know we've got Mr. John Underwood on the chat too. John Underwood, for my listeners, he works at the Hard Rock Casino, which is owned by Cherokee Nation. Another great experience. I'm gonna give Cherokee Nation a shout. But you're right, Doug. I mean, it is a balance with the human experience and the guest experience because you guys are a guest service, guest customer first industry, right, Joe? I mean, we
Yep.
got we want to retain customers because that ultimately that drives demand, drives revenue.
It's all about the experience, and there's always going to be an element of people that want that experience. How can you drive somebody that maybe is an individual that would rather sit on their couch and bet online to go to a brick and mortar place? That's a good question, and I think that there's always going to be something new that comes up with that you and I can't even perceive right now, 10, 20 years down the road, of how you get that generation to go, because it's going to come up. As that generation gets older, are their likes going to change away from just wanting to be on their cell phone to more human interaction? I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of things that my 8 and 7-year old do right now that scares the hell out of me. And I hope that some of those things change, but we'll see as we progress.
No, it's definitely evolving as the industry continues to evolve. And I've said this too for years, and some people criticize this statement, but I think the security industry needs a kind of kick in the ass sometimes because we haven't really evolved over the last couple of years. And I say that cautiously, but also pretty strongly because if you look at technology and product wise, yeah, you've got your typical cameras, you got your VMS systems, your access control systems. Yeah, you've got AI, computer vision that's coming out. And from an analytic perspective, what I've seen, Joe, is weapon detection, face rec, license plate recognition. Cool. They've been around for years, by the way. Nothing really special about those technologies. But something that's unique now is bet recognition and using AI to recognize bets and dealer faults and dealer payouts on table games, which is somewhat new. But I ultimately think what's happening now outside of the security industry, there's a company called Swear, and they're not tuning in right now, but there's a company called Swear, and that's what this company is, not a security company, they're a technology company, but they focus on deepfakes, like deepfake technology. They actually have a solution for deepfake. So if I want to pretend I'm Joe Doe and take your image, your face, your video, your voice, and I want to replicate that to either bypass some kind of security at MGM or gain access to personal information, I want to be able to authenticate that and say, hey, this isn't Joe speaking to me. There's got to be something off there. So there's a company out there now that's doing that for deepfake technology. And I learned about this company literally 2 weeks ago. But I think that's the biggest challenge coming for security, because obviously you'll still have physical security challenges. You'll still have, advantage players and some drunk or some, God forbid, active shooter cause up the scene. But every now and then, I think what's going to be more prevalent is going to be that cyber kind of digital footprint with people trying to manipulate the system online or image and likeness or whatever, what have you. But what have you seen, Joe, from a digital side, from cyber side? What are you seeing? I know,
Uh,
I don't want to bring it up, but I know MGM got hacked, not too long ago, which again, not your fault, not your jurisdiction, right? Your physical security, not cyber, but MGM did get hacked, and they had to pay out, money for that.
for sure, for sure. Look, I mean, anything cyber related, I think is the most frightening thing, and emerges and changes every single day. Where you hear about some new technique, some new way, and that's the way of the future, right? Like it's even the way of wars being fought at this point. Conventional ways of thinking about security are quickly evaporating and going out the window, where there's such that convergence of physical and cyber. And we had a great panel where we talked about that, where
Yeah.
that is the route that things are going, and not just in the casino and hospitality industry, but overall. I consider myself much more of a physical security individual, and if I didn't have the support and the quality individuals in our company on the cyber side that we were communicating on a daily basis and had that appropriate support and structure where they are aligned under that same pillar, it would be very, very difficult. But I'd argue vice versa too, and I think I would speak for cybersecurity professionals. There's plenty of things that us that are predominantly more in the physical security side of things can help them with, especially when it pertains to that individual that might be trying to do things specifically that we're so accustomed to and what we've been trained with for years. They go hand in hand, and it's important that that's recognized too. There isn't one that's just going to totally go away. That is, cyber is the route that things are going. The deep fakes, the concerns around that, fake information that is out there, and it's about identifying ways that you can better protect your company and ensure that your systems are secure. It's an ongoing battle for everybody. I mean, it's in the news every single day, no doubt.
Well, to your point, Joe, it's like on the physical side, like you guys can build a persona around the aggressor or the intruder. Like you've got a face shot, you got a
Yep.
body shot, like you know who that person is, or you have an inclination who that person is. Where on the cyber side, you're dealing with a ghost. You don't really know who that person is. You don't have a visual. You can't go to a
Absolutely.
camera, right? You can't see exactly who that person is. But that's a whole different element. But to your point, and again, I want to give kudos to individuals like yourself, but also like guys like John Underwood and Tony Clark. What they do well, what you guys do well, is you guys communicate and have synergy with security and surveillance and cyber and even marketing and player development. And for so long, Joe, those departments were sideload departments.
Yep.
So again, another lesson to be learned there. And again, for manufacturers listening, on this conversation, questions that we should be asking on the vendor side is, hey, Joe, how involved are you with InfoSec? How involved are you with player development? What's the communication like? Do you speak with those people? What processes do they have? Do they have a voice at the table? And if Joe says, yeah, we've got, weekly or biweekly calls, or hey, Taylor, we don't speak with them. Well, it's like, well, why not? So it's just like, these are just some basic things I like to preach, Joe, that I think is
Oh,
healthy
yeah.
for the security industry, man, because we should be seeing the more synergy across departments.
I totally agree. And I mean, I do think that that's one of the things that I'm proud of most with MGM is how those synergies are truly, like you said, there was a time I think every company had them all siloed out and there were differences. And sure, maybe you had some communication here and there, but the reality is you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So recognizing that you need to have those key stakeholders under that same pillar. Yes, you all do things that are a little bit different, but the reality is at the end of the day, it's all about protecting the infrastructure and what we have and what we're in business for. And if you're not at the table and have some connectivity every single day, look at it from the perspective of at a time where you were just a physical security practitioner and you had people that were reporting to you, you have touch points with them every single day. That's natural. It should be the same thing if you're under the same reporting structure for cyber, for IT, for risk, for legal. If all of those entities are aligned and you are talking every single day to solve issues, you are going to protect your company. And if something does happen, you get to react a lot quicker because you already have those relationships and that information pre-established and built. And it goes back to what we've talked about a few times. Communication and relationship building is the most important thing in our industry in general, and that goes for internal for an issue like this too.
Well, the ones that do it well and the ones that actually speak with marketing and player development because they got the most money anyway are the ones that
Yep,
are the most successful. So it's like why
no
not be
doubt.
revenue generating, right? Why not speak to those
Exactly.
folks?
Yep, you got it.
Well, Joe, we got about 14, 15 minutes left. So guys and girls listening in, I do want to invite you again to raise your hand, ask a question to Joe. Time is limited. But 15 minutes left on the call. I can keep asking Joe a question. I can go on for Joe, ask questions forever. But if you do have a question, raise your hand. I will bring you to the forefront. We'll spotlight you, and then you can ask away. So I do invite you to ask a question. We got a couple comments in the chat that I do want to recognize. Marlon Brandy, online digital gambling from a VR headset is a huge regulatory compliance nightmare. It may be here in the future though. I think it's true, right, Joe?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It is. I mean, and there are unique things that you are seeing continuously develop on the online gaming side of things that flirt with the physical side of things too. There's something to be said on that particular aspect that I think we see industry wide where an individual behind their phone is going to react and say things very, very different than perhaps the standard individual that might just be upset in a brick and mortar casino, right? And you see that with online bullying, and you see that with social media posts. That disconnect of the human being right in front of you, we see in the online gaming space too, as an industry where certain threats that come through that way that might just be text or telephonic, where we didn't see on that type of scale with just brick and mortar. And I think that just goes along with the general culture and industry, the general culture of you see a lot more bullying and a lot more things said from people behind a computer or electronics than you do face to face. And that's the sad reality, I think, of the trend that we see in our culture in particular in the US.
Well, it's easy to be a keyboard warrior, man, in today's
Absolutely.
but
Yep.
I mean
But it creates a security challenge, right?
yeah.
And it does require, make no mistake, every single threat, every single even hint of a threat that comes through, you have to devote people to investigate, and it ties up resources with not only your corporate security, your property security teams, law enforcement, and as those continue to increase, it's just going to eat up more and more personnel hours that are you wish you were devoting to other proactive things.
How big are we talk about this too? How big are insider threats with, casinos and maybe your team, or maybe you've seen this outside of the industry? But I know
Yeah,
sometimes when you train individuals, you get them on board, maybe they're happy, they're satisfied, but maybe they just have a bad day and they just go off the rail and now become an inside threat. That could be stealing, that could be cheating, that could be hurting someone, workplace violence scenario. So how are you balancing kind of the inside threat scenario there?
Yeah, I mean, insider threat, I'd argue any company is a major concern, especially when it comes to anything that might be mental health related. How are you handling that? I think that one also goes back to what we talked about with the convergence of physical and cyber is you need to have an appropriate key stakeholders established that are reviewing any hint of threat coming through. If it's cyber related, do you have the ability to see when they're using thumb drives? Is there mass downloads? Like things from that perspective for data, especially player development, are big deals for the casino industry. But also just to your point, I had a bad day and I said something stupid on the casino floor. That needs to get reported. That needs to be vetted by all key stakeholders, risk, legal, security, HR, and there needs to be an identified path forward of how you're handling it so it doesn't put anybody at risk. And those continue. Those are big deals, and you can't ignore any of them that come through. So as a company, especially in an industry that has as many employees as ours, you got to treat it just as you would if a guest was making that. You're going to put those same amount of resources in to investigate to ensure nothing bad's going to happen and you're protecting the brand.
To expand on that, Joe, again, when I spoke with Jason Boss, works at Westgate, son of Dirk Boss, he mentioned mental health. I
Yep.
think, having a community of casino professionals that say, hey, if you have a rough day, boss pisses you off, customer pisses you off, having someone to talk to that's going through the similar thing would be helpful. And I think Jason, what he's done now is he advocates strongly for that. So he'll try to engage with mentors that are willing to have conversations with him outside the casino environment. And it could be as simple as calling me late at night, having a conversation just to shoot the shit and tell me about your day. Something as simple as that can go a long way for someone that has to be at a casino floor. Because again, I'll say this to my grave, you guys have the most difficult job protecting the environment in the casino. And so when you need to kind of offload that, I feel like sometimes it's not there, or people in the industry don't have that resource available where they can offload to someone else. So I do want to encourage that when it comes to mental health, because a lot of times when active shooter scenarios or issues that go down, it's something's not right in the mind. And so I think there's got to be a resource available for that.
I'll go back to us talking about the biggest risk and threat to our industry being retention and recruitment, and some of the things that we identified while we were trying to determine what is it that needs to happen for a path forward to ensure we're not seeing this type of turnover rate. And some of it revolved around wellness. So there was a lot of an emphasis from us to ensure that we had an effective wellness program that included mentorship, just somebody to talk to, because we had security personnel that they were faced with situations that they didn't quite realize that it would be something they would see as consistent as they do in our industry. And by giving them that outlet, it was a piece of the many things that we instilled into our culture that helped reverse that. They felt that we actually cared and we are actually emphasizing on their wellness and health and well-being, and that makes them loyal to what they're doing on a daily basis. And it's important. I mean, any of us that have been in the security industry, you've seen terrible things at one time, right? And I think a lot of times you're accustomed to, oh, don't talk about it, but that's the wrong way. You want to promote talking about it. It's that release. It's to ensure you're getting the right help, because if you're mentally not well, you're burned out, you're no good to us, you're not going to be treating your guests, your fellow employees the way that we want you to. So it behooves us to make sure that we are investing in a proper wellness mentorship program to ensure you have the right resources if you are going through something.
And that was the point of what Jason was saying, was just having that availability towards a resource like that. Because him and I spoke about generation disconnect too, having different kind of generations. Maybe they grew up differently and they don't know how to say something correctly or respond, or maybe don't feel like enough where they can say something. So do you find that too sometimes, Joe, with different kind of generations of people that you manage and lead, that you
Yeah.
got to be chameleon sometimes. You have to adapt to kind of what they're going through.
You do. There's no one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a major emphasis for us on leadership development for those mid-level managers too, right? because you have a wide variety of backgrounds, education, age gaps, that some generations react differently to that. I mean, I think we can all talk about our parents probably react a different way than we react with our own kids, vice versa. You hear about all of that, right? And it's a reality. And as a leader, you've got to recognize that you need to adapt your style to get the most out of that particular employee and ensure they feel empowered, that they can instill that in their leaders and their direct reports beneath them too. You have to, because if one size fits all and you're seeing those types of turnover rates, it's something, clearly something's not working. So adapt.
Well, kudos to you for reducing from 60 to 25, man. I'll
We're
take that
still
any day.
going. We're
Yeah.
still going. Yeah, 25 is still high, but we're getting there. We're fighting forward. We're gonna
There
get
you
there.
go. Well, we got about 5 minutes, guys and girls. I'm going to ask Joe one more question from a seven-figure business owner that wanted me to ask Joe a question. But again, I want to invite you to raise your hand. If you do have a question, raise your hand with the little emoji react button at the bottom. I'll bring you forward. I'll let you ask Joe a question. Got about 5 minutes left, so I do want to value Joe's time. But Joe, my final question for you, man. Again, this is coming from a seven-figure business owner. Her name is Celia Cortez. She lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She owns a private security firm. So what she does is she helps with high net worth families. So anyone from 8 figures to 9 figures to 10 figures of income, she helps private security for. So her question, pretty general question, by the way, nothing too challenging. But her question is, what training do the teams who typically work in casinos receive? All too often, we see bottom level security working in these environments. Those types of people often lack a true capability to respond to real threats. So, from your perspective, Joe, how would you perceive that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a wide variety of different trainings and elements out there that make it very, very difficult for consistency and quality of individual. I'll reference MGM specific on this one because I'm aware of what we do, and it's all about consistency and how you're producing that training and making sure that you've got the right feedback from the operators, that if there's a particular training element that needs to be added to the program, that you have a team that is able to develop that and deliver that in a short amount of time. And at MGM, we have a training academy, and that's all they do. A training academy team, a new security officer is going through a 2-3 week kind of a mini abbreviation of what you would imagine a law enforcement academy would be going through, but it's everything: first aid, CPR, defensive tactics, recognizing suspicious activities, any item that you could think of that would support the service element, even how to talk to people, report writing, all of that is packed
Good.
into, a 2-3 week academy course that we also replicate at properties that are outside of Las Vegas as well. And they have to pass those. So you have that baseline to start, and then it's the remedial throughout the year, and then it's checking in on them and assigning them with field training officers, somebody to mentor them as they're getting on board on how to deal with certain situations. And that's kind of how we close the gap of, individuals feeling that they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into, is similar to how law enforcement operates. You attach them to a field training officer for a period of time. That's their mentor. They remember that. That FTO is there to mentor a new security officer on board, and that's how you build that trust and improve retention numbers. It's always evolving. Like when we have clean data and we have clean analytics and we send those surveys out to our officers, is what is it that you need? What do you feel? What tools, resources you need? They provide that feedback back. Our training and development team, in coordination with other key stakeholders, builds a training module around that, and it gets delivered to all properties, to all employees. And that is the consistency, and then the remedial training, and then properly checking it and making sure that you have mentors that understand how to deliver that and how to make sure that that's getting done with those officers. Everybody learns at a little bit of a different pace and rate, right? So it's also not a one size fits all. So you might get through the 3-week academy. As an individual, you might be an all-star. You get through the FTO program in a week, but some other individuals, it might take an extra week, and that's okay, because that's building the trust that, hey, we hired you. We saw the value and what you can provide from both a service and a security perspective. We delivered all this to you. We'll invest a little bit more time to make sure that you're getting through what's required for you to go out on that floor on your own and deal with as you put it, the craziness and the ever evolving shit show from time to time that they get in the casino.
Well, I like that because it's a personalization aspect when you come to training and retention and nutrition, of course. And it reminds me because when I walked on Oklahoma State, I had a personalized meal plan, I had a personalized strength plan. Of course, we had general plays and I got to learn the playbook, got to learn formalities and schemes. But if I
Yeah.
wanted to put on X amount of weight, this was the plan that I had to do. If I had to, improve my strength or my bench or my squat, I had to do X amount of reps to get towards that or X amount of lifts to do that. And so I like that personalization aspect because that's exactly how you get, low return, low attrition there. But Joe, I got a question. This is the last question here, since no one wants to raise their hand and ask a question live other than Doug. But Doug, I do appreciate your question. This question's coming from Marlon in the Q&A. He said, "Can you ask Joe for some thoughts on the setup and structure of the gaming surveillance department?" Now, Joe, you're corporate security, not surveillance, but maybe you have some
Yep.
insights on the surveillance side of what's the setup, what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for the most part, what I've seen across the board, a lot of it is driven by regulatory, where they want a separation in surveillance that's predominantly focused on the casino floor, and then security surveillance, right? Which is predominantly focused off the casino floor. There are a lot of regulatory requirements in almost any jurisdiction that I can think of that you're operating domestically, at least, where they want that delineation and separated out. However, that's a hand in hand relationship that goes every single day. What's something that happens on the casino floor, if security needs to respond, you better have a damn good relationship with your surveillance department and vice versa, right? So that comes down to that relationship building. If you do have it where it's two separate entities, there should be daily communication. They should be on similar radio platforms, the same radio platform. Sure, they might have to change channels, but there needs to be those protocols behind scenes where when you're calling out to the eye in the sky as a security officer, it's surveillance or security dispatch, and they're all aligned. There's success in that because it's such a legacy aspect in the casino and gambling industry where there's so many of them that have that a little bit split off, mainly for compliance and regulatory reasons. As long as there's that working relationship, I think, generally speaking, as an industry, we've made that work. Sure, are there certain things that perhaps the surveillance techs are a little bit more keen in looking for that are related to the gaming surveillance side of things? Absolutely. But if you're working it correctly, you're supplementing some of those things that you want to make sure that your security surveillance team is looking for off the casino floor that are related to the risk that you want to make sure that at least you're tag teaming both the aspects of that and you're operating the facility effectively.
And it goes back to what I said earlier about manufacturers asking that question in advance of saying, "Hey, Joe, how well are you involved with compliance or legal or
Yep.
surveillance?" Right? Because
Yep.
eventually, if you purchase that product, there's going to be eyes on the product anyway from outside your department, right? So it's good to
No doubt.
have those questions out there. But man, we are at time. I know we're a little bit over, so I do want to thank you again, man, for spending some time with me this last hour. But any final comments or words you'd like to say while we got you?
No, Taylor, this has been fun. Obviously we're passionate about the topic. Love talking about the topic, especially individuals. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm down for anything like this anytime. So again, it was an honor to be part of the first one that you have going on live here, and love what you're doing. Love the group that you got together. Great questions, and look forward to many, many more in collaboration. I mean it when it comes to relationships, right? We're all here. We can all help each other. So I commit that to you too. Like anything that I can ever do, anything you need, anything that I can talk to the group about, for those on the call too, I look forward to it.
So what Joe is saying, guys and girls, is you need to go subscribe to SVIP at svip.news. Go hit that subscribe button because again, moving forward, these sessions will be only for subscribers. So I encourage you to go to my website, www.svip.news, hit the subscribe button. This recording will be available on the website only for subscribers. So again, another benefit of these sessions. But our next session is next Wednesday. We'll be sitting down with, I think it's FIFA. We're sitting down with FIFA next Wednesday. So if you guys do subscribe, you'll have access to the head of security at FIFA, which no, I'm not a big soccer guy, but you know what? I'll listen to some soccer talk. But Joe, my friend, a pleasure was mine, my friend, and I appreciate everyone for tuning in today. Y'all have a great day and stay safe out there.
Thank you.